Hi, I'm Gene Trowbridge, and welcome to our YouTube channel. This YouTube regards capital calls. And capital calls happen when the fund, the partnership, the LLC, has run out of money and has needs for additional capital. And so we have to do one or three or four or five things available to us in the fund by what the operating agreement says to raise extra capital after the original capital has been invested by the investors. So let's see what's going on here. So this is me, partner in Trowbridge LLP. We're syndication lawyers, and I was a former syndicator building quite a bit of self-storage facilities in Southern California. I've been a real estate broker for many years, 40 years as a CCIM senior instructor. I did go to law school at 45, though, and kind of make a career change into being a securities attorney. I wrote a book called It's a Whole New Business, and the fourth edition is going to be available to you when we get to the end of this presentation, or at least a PDF of it is going to be available to you. And in my spare time, I'm an old runner. I run half marathons, a couple every year, and I'm getting slower and slower as we go, but that's what I do. So let's talk about capital accounts. So we're going to talk about the operating agreement, really. We need to look at what distributable cash is defined as in an operating agreement. Then we're going to look at Article 2, which deals with capital calls, primarily from the members. Article 3 deals with capital calls that can come from the manager, maybe something different from the members and third parties. And then the authority of the manager is defined in Article 6. So we're going to look at a definition, and we're going to briefly look at Article 2, 3, and 6. And these article numbers, of course, are from our operating agreements. Different attorneys might have them placed, these discussions placed in different parts of their operating agreement. But you're going to be able to find capital calls, manager advances, and authority of the managers in the operating agreement if you just bother to read it. There we go. So we define distributable cash, and I think it's important. So it's all the cash that the company can get, which would include operations or capital transactions, which would be the initial investment of the investors, reduced by the amount necessary to pay all the bills, the interest, marketing fees, all the things you have to pay, and then the repayment of advances to by members or by the manager, plus the interest, and additional reasonable accounts as the manager determines, taking into consideration reserves. So this is how the manager manages operations and distributable cash. They follow this formula. And one of the things that's important is B, because we're going to come back to that, the repayment of advances plus interest thereon. So just shortly, what it says is if we go to a capital call, an advance from the members, the manager, or third party, those are going to be paid back first before any cash distribution is available to the members. So that's where we say that you're going to get paid back if you help out the company before anyone else who doesn't help out the company gets paid. That's important. Definition of distributable cash. Now, the first article we're going to look at, once again, in our operating agreement, it's called Capital Calls. And there are a number of ways to do it, and I've picked 3 to demonstrate in this video. The first one is probably the most common one I use. It says, although the manager intends to raise sufficient money from investors for operations and capital improvements prior to the purchase of the property, which is at the beginning of time when you're forming the LLC, it's possible that the manager, on approval of a majority of the membership, interests, the investors, may make a capital call in order to raise additional capital contributions. So in this, we're saying the manager doesn't have the absolute right to make a capital call, but after laying out the reasons for a capital call, if the majority of the members say, yes, let's do that, the member will make a capital call in order to raise additional capital. Now, in this presentation, I'm not going to talk about the remedies and what happens if one person contributes capital and the other person doesn't. But I'm going to say simply stated that the people who contribute the capital will get that paid back first before the people who don't contribute get any future distributions. And that's right out of the definition of distributable cash. Oh, another possibility that we use is if the manager determines that additional capital contributions are necessary or appropriate, the member may request additional capital contribution from the members in really a pro rata share. The important thing about this is that this doesn't call for a vote. This gives the manager the right to make a call for capital contributions. And if you put up 10% of the original money, and here comes a capital call for X, you are going to be asked to contribute 10% of the capital call. Once again, what happens if you don't? Well, if you don't contribute, then you won't get any capital distributions, because the manager, according to the definition of distributable cash, has to pay back the people who make capital call contributions before anyone else, actually before there is any distributable cash to give to the other investors. And then there's one more that we have, and this is pretty specific. The manager does not have the sole authority to make a capital call. Although the manager intends to raise sufficient money, fine, on the approval of the majority of interests, we can have a capital call. So this is just kind of like the first one, except the first statement is more in your face to the investors, because some investors are just not interested in coming into a fund where the manager can make capital calls. I mean, you only have so much money if you put it all in the deal. You don't want them to come back and ask you for more money. So this one is specific, and that first sentence really hits you. The manager does not have the sole authority. We're going to have to vote. And what happens if the vote is positive, but you don't have any money? Well, that's fine. You just know from the definition of distributable cash that there won't be any distributable cash until the investors who have made the distributions get their money back. That's very important. And then I have on the slide, or question mark question. There can be a million different ways that a sponsor and their investors want to agree at the beginning of time on how you do a capital call. And so sometimes my documents will have one of these three capital call provisions, and then the next one that we put in there is, as an alternative, the manager can present any capital call formula they want to the investors, and either with a majority or 75% or unanimous, whatever you want, ask for the approval of the members. So that's a pretty important part, that provision for capital calls. I mean, where are we? We're at the point that the company doesn't have enough money to make the mortgage payments to operate the property, and we're going to lose our money if we can't step up. So we have to be flexible in how we raise additional money. And one of the ways is just simply capital calls from the original investors to put in more money than they had originally invested as the start when they're putting together the fund to purchase the property. Now, let's say that doesn't work. Well, here comes Article 3, and Article 3 gives us 3 opportunities other than a capital call. Article 3 in my document is entitled Manager Advances, Member Loans, and Third-Party Loans. So there are 3 ways we can get money that doesn't involve a vote and a capital call. And in manager advances, it says the manager may, but is not required, to loan its own funds or defer reimbursement of its out-of-pocket expenses as an advance. So the manager can put money in. The manager can stop taking their management fees, can stop taking their construction fees, whatever. And the money that they either put in or defer is treated as an advance. Now, that's important because the definition of distributable cash says before there's anything to distribute to the members, we have to pay off the advances and the interest on the advances. And this particular paragraph says, and I think it's important that if the manager is going to make an advance, we define upfront what the interest rate is the manager will get. And the manager, I have managers who don't want any interest. I have managers that say, well, our cost of capital is whatever. In this example, we use 10%. So the investors know all throughout the operations of the fund that if the manager is making advances, it's agreed to ahead of time that the interest rate is 10%. And then we go ahead and actually make a little statement that's related to the cash distribution definition. And basically it says interest on the manager advances are an expense of the company, will accrue, and will be paid as an advance prior to any other cash distribution. So that's good. Now, I have a comment down there, see section 6 of the PPM for conflicts of interest. And the major conflict of interest I'm talking about is, let's say a manager has 5 or 6 funds out there, and at one time, one fund needs money. The manager may, but is not required to loan its own funds. So there's a conflict in there. If you run multiple funds and you're the manager, you are not obligated to help any fund. If you're an investor and you think the manager is obligated to help your fund, you're incorrect, as long as the operating agreement covers manager advances and conflicts of interest. Now, member loans. Let's say you go out and make a capital call request, and the members say no. Okay, now you're still stuck. You're short of money, but the capital call isn't going to work. So alternatively, the manager can obtain a loan from one or more of the members, which will earn such interest as may be negotiated by the parties. Okay, so here we can go, there's always 1 or 2 or 3 heavy-duty investors in every deal. So if the capital call doesn't come through, what the manager can do is go to those individuals and say, would you like to make a loan to the company? They can make a loan to the company, and interest rate is negotiable. Everyone knows that because the operating agreement says it's negotiable. So it could be a straight interest rate. It could be a different percentage of sale proceeds. It can be whatever is agreed to between the members who are making the loan and the manager who's representing the company. Now, this is important because in our definition of distributable cash, member loans get paid back first. Member loans and the interest get paid back before there's any cash distribution to the other members. So through capital accounts, through manager advances, or through member loans, once that new capital comes in, that new capital is going to be paid off before any distributions start up again to the members. Now, the third thing you can do is, and maybe you want to do this first, you can go out and see if there's an unrelated party who might like to make a loan, like a bank. Maybe you can get a bridge loan or something. But anyhow, there is a possibility that the manager may negotiate a loan or credit from one or more third parties, and on such terms as a manager deems reasonable and appropriate. Well, that's important. So we have capital calls, we have member advances, and we have member loans, and we have third-party loans. So there are basically 4 different ways that a company can get new capital in after the original capital is raised to help save the property. Now, how does all this work according to the authority of the manager? In Article 6, Section 4, major decisions and the restrictions on the authority of the manager. It says the manager shall not have the authority to do any of the following things unless there's a positive vote of the majority of all the interests. Well, in this operating agreement, the manager can't resell or refinance the property without a majority vote. That isn't always in every document, but it's in this one. And then the next one is deal with the distributions and make the manager have an advance or get a loan for a third party. Sometimes we still have to get a vote of the members to allow the managers to do what's in Article 3. Sometimes we don't. And the manager has the right with the affirmative vote to alter the percentage interest applicable to the units, other than as described in Article 2.3. So that really means that if a member, how that would really be applied, if a member is going to make a loan to the company, maybe the terms of the loan is that the member who makes a loan is going to get a priority payment before anyone else does. And it's going to be more than just interest. It's going to be a share of the profits. So if that's the case, on an affirmative vote, if that's what it calls for, the manager can go in and reduce everyone's percentage ownership. Right? That also would apply in a capital call. I've talked before, what do you do if some of the members don't comply with the capital call? Well, on the affirmative vote, which would be part of the capital call provision, there's a possibility that everyone who doesn't vote will have their ownership percentage diminished. I mean, for example, we raise $1 million to start with, everyone has their own ownership percentage. Now we have a $200,000 capital call, so now we have $1.2 million. Let's restructure the ownership percentage, and the people who put in the $200,000 extra will have a bigger share than the people who didn't contribute anything. So there will be a pro rata reduction in the ownership percentage according to the new capital. And here's another one. Upon an affirmative vote of the majority of interest, the manager can alter the percentage interest applicable to the units. And that would be how you deal with a capital call when someone doesn't contribute. Maybe the penalty, if you would, for not contributing is a reduction in your ownership share. Maybe it's not a penalty, and maybe it's just a reflection that other people now have put in more, so they will have a bigger ownership share than you do. So all these things are covered in the operating agreement, and it's important for the sponsor to read the operating agreement ahead of time so they know what the plans are just in case we need a capital call. And it's important for the investors to read the operating agreement so they know what's required of them when a capital call comes about. Now, my book, It's a Whole New Business, I'm in the 4th edition now, is available to you to receive a free PDF by going to this website, book.tnllp.com. And all these chapters are in the book. And we do talk about extensively about the things that go on in an operating agreement. If you go to the website and you really want a hard copy, we'll send you a hard copy just for shipping. I think it's less than $10. And also, I have an Audible. If you go to Amazon and go to the Audibles, I've narrated this book and you can listen to it if that's how you prefer your information. So once again, it's Gene Trowbridge of the law firm Trowbridge and Ney. You can contact us by going to our corporate number, and they'll transfer the call to me or Jonathan or Tim. And here's our website. You can go to the website and you can sign up for a free consultation at the website. And once again, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and look throughout all the YouTubes that we have that talk about all sorts of issues having to do with securities laws. So I hope to see you again